The streets of Quezon City were alive with noise that evening, jeepneys honking, vendors calling out their goods, children laughing as they chased each other through narrow alleys. Among the crowd walked a barefoot girl. Her name was Althea. Her hair was uncombed, her clothes were torn, and her small stomach growled with hunger. She had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days. Clutching the strap of an old bag where she kept scraps of paper and broken pencils, she gathered her courage and stepped closer to a busy cafe on the corner. Inside, well-dressed people sipped iced coffee, their laughter spilling out onto the street. By the entrance stood an upright piano, its once glossy surface now faded from years of use. Althea's eyes fixed on it as though it were treasure. Taking a deep breath, she approached a group of strangers outside the cafe. In a soft voice, almost trembling, she said, "Kuya. 8, can I play the piano? Just for food?" At first there was silence, then muffled laughter. A man shook his head and muttered, "Anong alaming batong yen sa piano? She can't even afford slippers." A group of teenagers leaned against the wall, smirking, whispering to one another as if waiting for a joke to unfold. Some customers glanced at her with pity, others with annoyance, wishing she would simply move along. But Althea did not step back. She clutched her bag tighter and looked again at the piano. The cafe owner, irritated but curious, crossed his arms and asked, "You play this piano? Anak, this is not a toy." Her eyes glistened, but her voice did not waver. "Please. I just want to play. Maybe someone will give me food." The crowd chuckled again, unaware that in a few moments, everything they thought about this little girl would change forever. Inside the cafe, the air was cool and filled with the aroma of brewed coffee and warm bread. Customers sat at wooden tables, scrolling through their phones, chatting with friends, and occasionally glancing toward the barefoot girl who had just walked in. The piano sat in the corner, an old upright model with chipped keys and scratches that told the story of countless hands that had played it through the years. It wasn't grand or polished, but to Althea it looked like the doorway to another world. She hesitated for a moment, her thin fingers twitching nervously by her side as she felt every eye in the room staring at her. The cafe owner sighed loudly, shaking his head as if regretting his decision already. "All right, Anak," he muttered, "just one song. Don't break my piano." His voice carried a mix of mockery and disbelief, and some customers chuckled at his words. A young woman whispered to her friend, "She probably doesn't even know where Middle C is." The teenagers who had followed her inside were already holding their phones, ready to record what they thought would be a disaster. Their laughter echoed softly in the background. Althea slid onto the piano bench, the wood creaking under her small frame. For a moment, she froze. Her reflection stared back at her in the glossy black panel above the keys, messy hair, dirt-streaked cheeks, a face that life had been unfair to. She swallowed hard, remembering nights she had tapped on tabletops to mimic the sounds of melodies she had once overheard in a music store. Her heart raced, not from fear of failing, but from the thought that this was her one chance. She gently placed her fingers on the keys, ignoring the whispers, the smirks, and the rolling eyes. The cafe, once filled with noise, fell into a tense silence, waiting for the sound of a mistake. The first note rang out, soft and trembling, like a whisper in the still air. At once, the smirks faded into silence. Althea's thin fingers moved carefully across the chipped keys, and then, like a sudden flood, music poured out of the piano. It was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, but it did not sound like a child fumbling with borrowed notes. It sounded alive. Each chord echoed with sorrow and longing, each delicate phrase carried the weight of her young but broken life. The sound filled every corner of the cafe, drowning out the laughter, the murmurs, and even the noise of the city outside. The teenagers who had been ready to laugh stopped recording for humor and instead recorded in awe, their mouths slightly open. A man who had rolled his eyes earlier now leaned forward, captivated, his coffee untouched. A mother sitting with her child felt tears sting her eyes as the haunting melody wrapped around her heart. The cafe owner, arms still crossed, found himself speechless as the old piano, under the hands of this barefoot girl, sounded richer and more powerful than he had ever heard. Althea closed her eyes, lost in the music. She was no longer a hungry girl in tattered clothes. In her mind, she was standing on a stage, her audience spellbound, her soul finally free. Each note was a prayer, each crescendo a cry, each delicate arpeggio a reminder of hope she refused to let die. She played not for fame, not for applause, but for survival, for the chance of a meal, for a moment of dignity, for someone to see her as more than a beggar. When the final note lingered and faded, the cafe was utterly silent. And then, as if a dam had burst, the room erupted in applause, tears, and astonishment. The applause in the cafe did not die quickly. People clapped and cheered, some rising to their feet as if they had just witnessed a concert in a grand theater rather than a humble corner shop in Quezon City. Althea, overwhelmed, lifted her hands from the keys and sat frozen, unsure if she should smile or cry. She had played her heart out, and for the first time in her life, people were not laughing at her, they were celebrating her. A woman hurried to the counter and ordered food, placing a warm plate of rice and chicken in front of the little girl. "Eat, Anak," she whispered, her voice trembling. Another man slipped a few bills into her hand, insisting she keep them. The same teenagers who once smirked now shouted, "You're amazing," and filmed every moment, their cameras capturing not just her music but the miracle unfolding. That night, the videos were uploaded to social media. By morning, they had spread across the Philippines like wildfire. Headlines read, "Homeless Girl in Quezon City Stuns Cafe with Beethoven Performance." News anchors replayed clips of her playing, marveling at her raw, natural talent. Comments flooded in, "She deserves a scholarship. God-given talent. Someone help this girl." Donations poured from strangers. Bags of food, clean clothes, and money enough to give her shelter. A music teacher from Makati offered free lessons, touched by her gift and determination. Althea, once invisible on the streets, had become a symbol of hope. In jeepneys, people watched her video on their phones. At sari-sari stores, her name was whispered with admiration. She had no idea that her performance in that tiny cafe was only the beginning of a journey that would soon take her far beyond the borders of the Philippines, onto a stage she had never dared dream of. Weeks later, Althea found herself in a place she had only seen on TV, the stage of America's Got Talent. The journey had been like a dream. From sleeping on sidewalks in Quezon City to standing under bright lights in Los Angeles, everything felt unreal. She clutched the edges of her simple dress, her bare feet now covered by donated shoes, her heart pounding so loudly she thought the judges might hear it. The audience was massive, thousands of eyes watching, waiting. When her name was called, she stepped forward, small and shy, the microphone taller than she was. Simon Cowell leaned forward, curiosity in his eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. Her voice trembled as she answered, "My name is Althea. I came from the Philippines. I used to play piano in cafes for food." A murmur swept through the crowd. Some gasped, others nodded in recognition, they had seen the viral video. Simon's gaze softened. "Well then, Althea, show us what you've got." She walked to the grand piano on stage, her small hands brushing against its polished surface. For a moment she closed her eyes, shutting out the crowd, remembering the old cafe piano with chipped keys. Then she began to play. The music soared, rich, powerful, flawless. Each note told her story, the hunger, the loneliness, the laughter she had endured, and the hope that kept her alive. The theater grew silent, the audience hanging on every sound. When the last note faded, the crowd erupted in thunderous applause, louder than anything she had ever heard. Simon's eyes glistened as he slowly stood. Without hesitation, he slammed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained down on Althea as tears streamed down her face. For the first time, the world didn't just see a homeless girl, they saw a prodigy destined to shine.